My name is Missy Whiteman. I belong to the Northern Arapaho and Kickapoo Nations. Thank you everyone for being here. I am so grateful that we're here. I'm so grateful to have you all here and all of our amazing filmmakers and our amazing one cast person, and just to be here and to talk about Indigenous film, Indigenous storytelling, revitalization, especially during a time like today and like these times. So welcome everybody. I'm going to go around and we'll introduce ourselves and which film we're representing and anything else that you would like the audience to know about you. And we'll start with Alex.
My name is Alexandra Lazarowich, and I'm a Cree filmmaker from Northern Alberta. And I'm currently in Toronto right now, and I directed the film Fast Horse.
Thank you. Who do you want to pass the mic to?
Oh, I keep it. Jeffrey.
Can you guys hear me? Hi, my name is Jeffrey Palmer. I'm a Kiowa filmmaker from Oklahoma, Carnegie, Oklahoma, to be specific. And I made the film Isabelle's Garden. So I hope everybody is doing well and glad to see everybody. Jessie.
Hi. My name is Jessie Adler. I'm the director of Boxers of Brule. I am based in Brooklyn on unceded Lenape territory, and I'm very excited to be here and keep these discussions going and films showing despite our current situation. So thank you all for joining, and I'll pass the mic to Lacosta.
Hi, I'm Lacosta Byington. I am enrolled in the Lower Brule tribe, and I'm a cast member of Boxers of Brule. And I'll pass it to Shiala.
Hi, I'm Shiala King. I'm a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe in South Dakota, and I'm a co-producer on Boxers of Brule. I have a lot of family in Lower Brule. It's where my dad's from and everyone on that side. So it really meant a lot to me to be involved at all. And I've been closely following everyone's story since then and looking forward to seeing how everything turns out. So, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I'd like to start, we're going to start the conversation. I'll start it with a couple of questions for everyone, and we'll go about halfway, and then we're going to open it up for the audience to participate and to ask questions. It'll be a little bit different than we did it last time, but I feel like it'll go wonderfully. So I'll start with Jeffrey. I had the opportunity to see your film Isabelle's Garden at Sundance when it premiered. And one of the things that really struck me about your film is the incorporation of Indigenous language in your film. Can you talk a little bit about that, and also like the influence of your film and why you wanted to write a film like this?
Yeah. I from the very beginning, when I started making a reel for film school, realized that a lot of what I wanted to do as a filmmaker was to include Indigenous languages. And my father is a linguistic anthropologist and is pretty noted for as a Kiowa instructor at the University of Oklahoma. So we taught Kiowa for, 25 years. And so I think that was always instilled into me, that my films included that. And so when I created Isabelle's Garden, it's about a Choctaw girl, and I had connections to the Choctaw Nation at the time, and came up on this story. And the film is really, I think it's special because not only the fact that we try to include language in the film to educate the public about the Choctaw language, but also what Isabelle Cox was doing at that time as taking care of her garden. And I remember thinking in my mind that I'm wondering if I could take this story about her connection to the community and what she was trying to do, and if I could dramatize it even more. And at the time, what I was being taught in school is that documentary has this very, these sort of stable bookends to them of places that you couldn't go. And I wanted to press against that, I think. I thought that by bringing a bit of magical realism into the space, that we could touch more people, I think, with the story rather than exploring it from a very direct cinema or verite style of just following this little girl. And so we did a lot of things. I had just seen the film Southern Beast of the Wild, and I remember thinking that I wanted it to have that type of magical quality to it, where you don't see parents, you know, there's, and that's what it does. She feels like she's kind of in this magical world in the film. And so once I crossed that line between documentary and fiction, and blurred them, I felt like I was doing something different, and I wanted to continue to do that in my work. And so even with this feature film that I just finished, Words from a Bear, we press against that line as well. It is more doc oriented, but it also pushes into the realm of magical realism and brings in all these things. And I think that that's good storytelling. And documentary is a format to do good storytelling. It doesn't have to be this blunt examination. And so that was, you know, one of the things that I think from a theoretical standpoint I was doing. What inspired me to do the film was not only that I was seeing this little girl take care of her little garden, her small garden. In the film, it's much bigger. And involving the community, but she also was learning Choctaw at the time, and I thought that that would be an interesting facet of understanding the youth's connection to their elders by helping them in different ways, but also learning and taking in things from the community itself. And showing that type of reciprocity, I thought was really, really important, and that it would make a statement. And at the time, in southeastern Oklahoma, I think President Obama had considered that specific area as being an area that was very much in poverty in southeastern Oklahoma. And that was an influence as well. What we were trying to do for Sundance, and this was part of a contest at Sundance, the Bill and Melinda Gates short film competition. Poverty was kind of the central ethos that a lot of those short films that were submitted were to be about. And so this was a story examining poverty from, you know, inside the United States, and specifically in southeastern Oklahoma, and how to overcome those things. And again, the magical aspect of it, I think, hit people and touched people. And out of all my films, this film is the one that really, really, I think, makes people think, and I get asked the most questions about it. And it really kickstarted my career as a filmmaker. So I really have a deep amount of love for the film.
Thank you. So the film in itself really touches on revitalization holistically, and especially like our values in helping other people and sharing our wealth. And to Indigenous people, a lot of our wealth really is, our cultural teachings, food. It's really not, I think, the Western society viewpoint, which is, it can be monetary, but it's really about sharing the gifts that we create. And in that way, it's film. I really love that you talked about magical realism, because I feel like that's a common theme in a lot of Indigenous cinema today. And Alex, your film also is a hybrid. I mean, to me, is a hybrid film as well. And your work really is crossing these boundaries of bringing together all of these different layers, like traditional layers, and then bringing in different styles of storytelling, filmmaking, and bringing this Indian relay horse racing to a different lens, per se. Do you want to talk to us about your influence for your film, the story of your film, and in the context of revitalization as well?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because my original sort of, when we were looking at rushers of this project, my original sort of inspiration was Creed, the boxing movie. And I'm a big admirer of like Ryan Coogler's work. And so we were looking at rushes from this project because we filmed for over a year, following this team for a year. So we had a lot of time to figure out what the film was going to be. And we actually figured out the film while we were editing and shooting at the same time, which I've actually never done before. So the choice to have it be like a verite style documentary, but also with very high production value, was something that just came together. Like, choices were made, but it was really interesting because I've never had a film fall together in quite the way this film did. And in all honesty, I remember I pitched this film at the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival as part of a panel. And I remember when I presented the film in our original treatment, the idea was to like make a native sea biscuit. And it was basically like the horse was going to be the main character, essentially. And the horse got hurt and we couldn't follow that story anymore. And so we sort of pivoted halfway through filming and decided to really make it about community and about Cody and Allison's relationship. And so that was a really interesting learning experience, I think, as a documentary director, to follow the story. Because I think early on, you have to write a treatment in documentary, and the advice that we've always gotten is, even if you don't know what the story is, you have to write down what the story is. You have to tell the ending when you're applying for funding and when you're getting money for projects. Funders want to hear that. So we had written this sort of very elaborate, Blackfoot Seabiscuit, and that wasn't the film that we came out with at the end. It was a completely different film, and I'm really thankful to our funders, who's CBC Digital. They saw, the first cut of the film, and they were, it wasn't what we had sold them, but they were down for the ride, and they really supported the project. And it was just a really interesting lesson in filmmaking, I think, for myself, because the film wasn't what I had expected it to be either. And I think what's really exciting, and I don't know if, Jeff, you feel this way, or other film producers and directors feel this way, but, I think in documentary, you got to be kind of crazy to get into it because you never know what the film is actually going to be. You can make promises, you can make guesses, you can make hopes and, put dreams and hopes into things, but you really never actually know what that final product is going to be, which is a crazy risk that we're all taking to make art and work and following real people's lives. And I think there's a weird excitement that documentary filmmakers get from working on projects where you don't know what the story is, and it's a puzzle and you have to put it together, and you have to be willing to take the risk to make documentaries. And I think that's why documentary making can be incredibly frustrating and also incredibly exciting and fun. And you kind of have to be crazy to want to do it again and make another film, because you're going to have the same things come up over and over again. And that's sort of where my passion for documentary comes from, is the unknown.
Thank you. Jessie, we're going to go to you with the same question about your film. What's your influence for creating this film, the process of creating the film, and then also how does it relate to revitalization?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I started this project as my thesis film for grad school at the Social Documentary Film Program at SPA. And just before that, I was in Thailand working with a group called Earth Rights International, and we were working a lot with ethnic minority groups and communities, indigenous communities throughout the Mekong region. And that was during the time of Standing Rock. So I was working with these communities who were facing very similar things to what our indigenous communities were facing, and getting the same treatment in these countries that we had looked down upon for decades for human rights violations. The same thing was happening in North Dakota. So I was very interested in continuing to follow those stories and hopefully bring more attention to our different indigenous communities and how they're being treated, and what their experience is that I think so many of us are just ignorant to in this country. So I knew I wanted to focus on young Indigenous women's voices, and someone had told me about what Shiona was doing and starting a boxing team, and so I went out there to meet her and see what was going on. And I mean, as soon as I met her, I knew that she was someone who really had a story to share and was so extremely passionate about learning more about her culture and bringing that to the young girls in her community to allow that to help them, understand themselves better, to understand what they have to offer the world, what the world has to offer them. And they definitely did some boxing and we went to some matches, but there was a lot more slumber parties and bonfires and picking sage and choke cherries and hunting for eagle feathers. And I think, I just watching them do that and watching them just get just the pride that they took in learning about it and seeing how that influenced their image of themselves, I think was really meaningful for me. So yeah, that's, I guess, what I hope to draw out in the film.
So we have your co-producer on here as well. We have Shiala King. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about your role on the film?
I guess, again, my name is Shiala King, and I'm a member of the Rosebud tribe. I was brought on a little later. I don't remember exactly at one point Jessie was on, but she was up in Lower Brule filming and doing all of these things we just talked about. And I think we were referred to each other by a teacher. Yeah. And it just sort of struck home with me because that's, like I said, where all of my family is from, and Rosebud being right next door, and all the stories I've heard from my dad, they're all in Lower Brule. It's where my siblings live. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the people in the film knew all of my siblings. But I also, I feel like boxing is I think it makes sense for the Sioux culture anyway. You know, and I've heard, you know, maybe nicer things, but I don't know. I think it can help a lot to feel a little closer to culture, even if it's through boxing or some sort of martial art. And one thing I think is very important that is definitely portrayed in the film is that no matter how bad things get or how bad it is on the res, there's still a sense of culture there. We're still going out and, like Jessie said, collecting sage and choke cherries and talking about the good red road and all of that. It's still happening anyway. And I think that connection is important. And I think it means that, you know, it's never too late, because we still have these things. It's still deeply ingrained. We grow up with it, it's there, and we can keep it going and strengthen it with each generation that continues. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so eloquent, and like exactly when you talk about like it's perfect, you know, for the Lakota Nation, because I feel it too. Like I felt like I was watching like coming of age ceremony. I felt like I was watching like a matriarchy, like society or clan. And like for me, the opening scene was really like it just spoke like so much about like faith and just how those teachings are passed on, and then how do you incorporate all of these different elements and bring it into boxing. And also like what you're saying is like it's never too late because it's ingrained in us. And one of our, you know, our teachings really is that like we've only gone through, you know, colonization for a little bit. You know, like if we've existed eons before, you know, colonization is like a drop in how long we've existed. So, you know, this film, you know, is really to me like this turning point for us, regardless of the bumps in the road, you know, that we may have. We always have bumps in the road in our life, but it also embraces, you know, our seventh generation. And I'm really super grateful to have one of the cast members here who is, you know, can speak to her experience in the film. And I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself, Lacosta.
Hello, I'm Lacosta. I came into this boxing team not knowing it was gonna be like this big of a thing, you know. I just thought it was something to do after school with my friends, something other than going home, you know. And I've been with it from the start. Like I was committed and I put in hours of work to grow, and I think I've seen that put through my fighting, my boxing. I've not to blow or anything, but I've never lost. And I think that really just shows how much work and effort I put into it. And I was more of a like not really, I was out there, but I wasn't out there. And I knew what I wanted for everybody, but I was gonna wait for them to realize it. And I think that with the struggles shown through the documentary, it really does show the struggles and the problems and the opportunities that the res does give people, and the help that you can get, and also the disadvantages of being there. And just showing the truth, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and there are struggles, you know, and it all leads back to one thing, and that's like the depression part of it. And, you know, I've learned a lot from it. Like, I'm pretty sure if I haven't made that decision to write my name down on a piece of paper and go to practice, that I wouldn't be where I am today, mentally, physically, anything like that. Because I was going down a dark path, and I just had to help myself and know what was better for me, and to be around older an older person that knew more than what I like, was going through the same thing and knew more about it and could help, and it was just a better thing. And I felt like I gained stuff from that so I could help other people, like bad experiences and good experiences, to help everybody. And yeah, I just think it's a really good thing, and I'm glad it happened. I think that's all I really.
You're all hesitant. Thank you so much. Yeah, so you're still boxing today.
Yes.
And then how can we find, do you have a handle, Instagram? What's the best way for us to follow your career?
Right now with everything, I'm because I was actually in a mental health treatment for 8 months. Yeah, before. So I'm kind of just trying to train and get back into my flow, and I was hoping to get into a fight this coming summer and just find a few in the Pine Ridge area, but I think the virus kind of put a stop to that. But
are you doing the training at home? Are you doing like home training? And do you have a home gym?
Yeah, we have a little gym set up downstairs, and before the virus shut down our gym next door, I was doing training over there. And a lot of it is I'm trying to teach my little cousins how to the basics, and yeah, just passing it on and helping. Yeah.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is, let's see, what time is it? So I'd like to open up to the audience, and if the audience has any questions, and if the audience has any, you could either type it on the side there. So if you look to your side there, there's like a, let's see here. I'm going to try to help you navigate. And I don't want to leave the meeting, so we're not going to leave the meeting.
Yeah, it should just be on the bottom.
There we go. Thanks, Lacosta. Super helpful. So you can either chat or have a conversation, and just unmute your microphone. You should be able to unmute it. Anyone? Bueller?
I was going to type it, but I'll just speak it. So all of your messages, all of your films have such strong messages of hope that are very meaningful and important right now. And I was wondering if you could speak to a message of hope you would want to share with young filmmakers, young Indigenous filmmakers today.
Should I start? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's an incredible, hopeful time, I think, for young Indigenous filmmakers. There's more opportunities than there ever has been, in terms of getting funding as a young filmmaker. I had an incredible amount of help on the last feature film that I made from different organizations at PBS, but in particular Vision Maker Media, who really worked closely with fostering me through the process, and allowed me to really explore things that I didn't think I would ever have the money or the type of backing that I did. And so it is an incredible, hopeful time, but more so than that is the storytelling itself. I think Indigenous storytelling speaks to what we're going through in this current situation, about resiliency, and what it means to survive, to have our stories survive through the centuries, and that we've been through all types of trials and tribulations, such as these, and are still here and remain to be able to tell these stories. And so I think that there is a lot of hope in that, in terms of what we're trying to say, I think, and all of these stories. Revitalization is really, really important in our societies, I think, in order to give hope. We have to think about the young people. We have to think about the youth, and how they are going to push us forward, especially in these times. And there's all kinds of struggles, whether it's poverty, whether it's racism, or what we're going through now. And those stories and their connections, these ancient connections, to our ancestors and the way that they dealt with these issues, I think come through very much in our filmmaking. And so for young filmmakers right now, it is a good time. As I said before, it's not just the opportunities that are inspiring. It's just the storytelling itself, and that we need that. We need Indigenous voices at this moment, and so that's my word of hope, I guess. But yeah, it's interesting that Taika Waititi just won an Oscar, and all of this is going on before this all came upon us. And so right now it's kind of hard to think about such things, but I think that was a huge thing that opened a lot of doors, and the words that he said on the stage about Indigenous youth telling their stories and that we need their stories, it was pretty prophetic, considering what we're going through now. So I say go out and get a camera and start doing what you think you need to do. And children understand media more than ever now, and they can pick up their iPhones and they can go out and they can make films and edit them and push them out to the world. And I think that gives us a lot of hope, not only for humanity, but for all of our tribal communities.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Alex, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think I sort of echo the same sort of sentiment. And I think that, a lot of groundwork has been done before, you know, I got into Sundance or before, you know, Taika won an Oscar. Like there was so much groundwork that was laid down for us by other people who maybe didn't have the same opportunities that we've had open to us. And I think for a long time, there's been a lot of people behind the scenes sort of pushing through to different boards and foundations and organizations and really asking hard questions by a lot of the funding bodies in the United States and in Canada and around the world. And what that sort of pushing and questioning has done has really allowed more Indigenous voices to flourish and to be the anchor for a lot of projects that are about our communities and are about, you know, Indigenous stories, because for a long time, our stories were told by other people. And sometimes, you know, the occasional story does get told that doesn't have any Indigenous sort of creative participation. But I think what's exciting right now in the landscape of Indigenous filmmaking, and, you know, through the Walker and through Sundance, and then also through you know, Ford Foundation and through all in Imaginative and Maoriland, what a lot of the people who've been in this industry for a really long time, they've really broken down some of the barriers that existed that kept us out of places for a really long time and didn't allow us to, you know, participate at such a high level of filmmaking. And so I think it's really exciting to see all of the opportunities that are being opened up and even wider, you know, regardless of, you know, where you come from, because you don't have to live in LA and you don't have to live in New York to be a filmmaker anymore. There's lots of great work coming out of, you know, New Mexico and Albuquerque and Oklahoma. And I think, you know, the stories are becoming more diverse, and with our participation and with us pushing to have our voices heard, you know, it's created some wicked films and some amazing storytelling, and that has gotten all of our voices amplified even louder. So it's a really exciting time to, you know, jump in and participate, or, you know, if you're a mid-career person, it's getting bigger and it's getting better. And I think that the people at the top are starting to listen to us. And I think that's really hopeful. And it has been through so much community work. It, you know, it wasn't just one person. And I think that's reflective of our communities themselves is, you know, we work as a group for the group's benefit. And that has been done by so many people. And I think that's the only way that I've had doors open for me, is because someone in my community has vouched for me and said that I could, you know, pull it off, or that my voice was worth listening to. So it couldn't have happened without their support. So it's really exciting. And I think if you know, if you're a filmmaker watching this and you want to get in touch and you need some advice or support, feel free to reach out. If you need someone to vouch for you, if you need someone to provide feedback, or if you just want to talk about career pathways and, you know, places to go to for funding, don't hesitate to reach out. We're all on social media, and now even more so. So please, you know, don't be shy. There's no stupid questions. And as a filmmaker, you're always learning because you're always making mistakes. So I can help, you know, I think all of us can help, you know, guide you through some of it. And if we don't know the answer, I'll pass you off to someone who does know the answer. So, you know, reach out. It's a community and we want more voices heard and at the table.
Thank you so much, Alex. And we'll pass that question to Jessie now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think, you know, hope is something that I am kind of fascinated with. And I think one of the reasons that I was really drawn to Shiala and her story, and, you know, that question of how do you hold on to hope when everything in the world is telling you not to? And I, you know, throughout the process of making the film, and I think Shiala and Lacosta can probably attest to this as well, I don't think there was one person involved in the film, you know, cast, crew, all of us, at one point or another, someone wanted to give up, because it gets really hard. Like, no matter the project, it gets really hard. You know, whether it's equipment or funding or just emotional weight, there are so many complications in documentary, especially if you want to stay true to the story and really get deep and go beyond where you imagined going, it can be really hard. And so I think, in the experience that we had, there was always someone to lift you up. So whenever I was doubting something, Shiona was, on my back telling me to pick up my camera and, let's go. So I would suggest just surrounding yourself with people who are as passionate as you are about telling this story. And like Alex mentioned earlier, this takes a little bit of crazy. And so I would say surround yourself with people who are as crazy as you are, and who, when you suggest going halfway across the country as a first-time filmmaker to do this thing you know very little about, you need people on your team who are going to say, yes, go do that. And it's going to be great. To also echo Alex's sentiment about reaching out to people, I don't think there's a single filmmaker in the documentary community that if you emailed would not respond. Everyone in this community is so passionate about sharing stories and bringing more voices into the conversation. I've cold called several people and everyone has been so responsive. So if there's someone's work that you like, just email them, and I think you can expect a response. And I think the only other thing I would recommend is to just do whatever you can to get rid of your ego and just ignore, the first time you make something, it might not be good. It probably won't be good for the several, first versions. I think the version that we put out was like version 563. Hopefully in 5 years when I look back at this, I'll see the million things that I wish I had done better. And the process of creating is evolving all of the time, and so hopefully you will improve. And so don't be hard on yourself if it's not exactly what you expect. That just means that you have good, high expectations and that you'll go on to do better things. But to just keep going, accept where you are, and realize that what you're doing is important.
Thank you. We'll pass it to Shiala now.
Actually, I forgot to mention that I'm currently located in New Mexico. I'm in Albuquerque, between Albuquerque and Laguna Pueblo. So I do end up hearing a lot about what New Mexico is doing for Indigenous filmmakers. And surprisingly, even organizations like Meow Wolf and George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones, is also really active in Indigenous filmmaking. There's a lot available. Even if you don't live in New Mexico, you could, like Jessie said, email any of these people and they would be more than happy to help you and point you in the right direction or give advice or sometimes even hire you. You never know. And in the era of technology, everyone has a smartphone nowadays, and there have even been fantastic films that were shot entirely on an iPhone. Even I think an iPhone 6S is kind of like what you need, which is surprising because it's not even close to the new ones. But and one thing that I've learned working in film and other social impact projects is it's not even so much the equipment. There's difficulties all along the way, and it may not be the most difficult, but certainly I find that often the most challenging thing is the idea, and that there can tend to be a shortage of ideas and creative ways of going about things that would make a difference. And if you have the idea, then it's worth giving it a try, because you never know. You can't let the equipment slow you down. And I know that Indigenous filmmakers and artists, we often come from the res and don't really have much, but no one in this is ever going to judge you for that. That's not even something you're remotely worried about. And yeah, everyone's supportive. So, and even, you know, sorry, I have a cat that's trying really hard to step on my keyboard. um, I'm also open to emails if anyone wants to contact me. Yeah, sorry, this, you know, home offices, dealing with this animal.
Right, quarantine.
Yeah, no, you kind of ruined my train of thought. I lost it. Get out of here. Yeah, I want to give people hope that you don't have to be self-conscious and you don't have to worry. You just have to go to shot. And IAI is always accepting students. So, you know, it's always worth a try. So, yeah.
Thank you. So we have a question, and I wanted to talk to Lacosta a little bit as well, and talk to you about, you know, one of the things that has been coming up is really like how there's a lot of challenges that we have as Indigenous people, and how does that differ from living in an urban setting versus a rural setting like reservation. You know, like the question is, how hard or easy is the reality of a revitalization in an urban setting versus a rural setting? Is there a difference?
I would say yes, there's a big difference from the people surrounding you to even just the air you're breathing. Like it's just a different feeling. It brings you a different energy, and you know, on the res it's poverty, and that's something not easy to work around, and that's just something that, and it's not easy getting off the res for most people. Once they're there till they're 25, they're going to be there for the rest of their lives. But you could, if you really wanted to, you could get off the res. But a lot of it falls back to addiction. A lot of people are addicted to substances. And that is what I think is holding a lot of people back, because I know that's what was holding me back for a long time from doing a lot of things, from physical health, mental health, school, everything. It was holding me back. And I feel like I had an opportunity of a lifetime. Like, not everybody's gonna get this opportunity to get better, but a lot of people don't want it. They're stuck in a mindset that they don't want to change, and they are not ready enough. They're stuck at the age that they became addicted at. If it was a young age, you know, they're gonna think they're a teenager forever, and it's just not a correct way to be living. And you know, in urban, it's, you know, I mean, there's still people addicted, but there's ways where they can swerve past being in the poverty line. Yeah, but that's kind of, yeah, that's all I have to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I want to commend you too for your eight-month treatment, and just being here right now as a young person, because I know that's a challenge. I also like struggled with addiction early on in my life, and became sober when I was in my early 20s. And it's like you're kind of like the odd one out all the time. And it took me a while to really like acclimate. And you know, my dad actually left the reservation. He was the first generation to leave, and he left when he was 18, and he never returned, but he still stayed connected. And I think that's the balance, you know, that I think a lot of people who leave the res struggle with. And my generation, like he always told me, like, we leave home, we leave the res, and you learn things, and then you always go back to teach your people or to help your people. And that's really like what I'm doing now. Like, I go home, you know, and I teach youth media training, but it's more about I'm getting taught, I'm getting schooled, I'm getting educated. And it's the young people that are teaching me, because I think like your generation has a very loving way of teaching us and having patience. And what you're doing, you know, just is so amazing. And just, I'm so proud of you. And I just want to tell you that.
Thank you.
So we'll move the question on to Jeffrey, because I know you're in Oklahoma, and that's a little bit of a unique situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think that yeah, Oklahoma is interesting because we don't have reservations in Oklahoma. You know, but they might as well be, in terms of how the allotments are set up, with family allotments, you know, all over the place that are connected. But it was, you know, it was really interesting. I did a film called The Sounds of Life in Minneapolis last summer, that was looking at Nawayi Center School. And it was amazingly different, I think, the context between the films that I was making in Oklahoma and New Mexico and what I was seeing and witnessing in this urban space in downtown Minneapolis, and a lot of the things that were happening and issues that were going on in the Phillips neighborhood, and how much of a struggle it was in terms of trying to foster indigenous teachings and ideas through this school, which is more of an alternative school, but it felt like it was a last stop, I think, for a lot of students that were feeling isolated in Minneapolis and different communities where they were going to high school, and ended up coming together. But it was really beautiful to witness some of the teachings that they were doing there, teaching Ojibwe, teaching Lakota and Dakota. And I was really blown away in that setting compared to what I had been filming in rural settings. In Oklahoma, it was different. Same issues, but a different style and a much more, I think, from what I saw, a much more difficult challenge to bring people together. And not to mention the fact that when I was filming this at the time was when all of these people that were essentially living in this makeshift housing, that they were homeless essentially right off of the boulevard there, pretty close to the school. And a lot of those students came from that homeless town, essentially is what it was. And so just a lot of different issues. And it was an eye-opening experience for me. but all of them came to school. They were there. They were learning language. They were drumming, singing. There was a lot of life in terms of what that school was and what it meant. There's also a historical thing, not only was it in the middle of the American Indian Corridor, and that there's a lot of history that goes back in this space and with that school, but it just felt like a continuation and an effort to that took everybody to get these kids through school, and for them to learn in a different way, and to understand things, traditional values. And I found it inspiring in a lot of ways. So yeah, I mean, I think that there is a lot of differences between those two spaces and what you're filming and understanding, but essentially the same things are happening to our culture. Poverty, whether it is loss of language, whether feeling isolation, all of these things become, part of that issue that we're trying to get an understanding of, and showing how to overcome those things.
Thank you. I actually taught at center school way back in the day when I worked at Magazine Communications, and Joe Rice is amazing. Yeah. He's such a phenomenal principal, and he really, I feel like that's the education that our Indigenous youth should have. And even though, like you said, it's the last stop, I'm like, I don't know, it really feels like the first stop for a lot of young people. And like what you're talking about is the encampment. And so that was really like the pressure of just the building of the city, and I'm trying to think of the word. I can't think right now, but it's just basically gentrification, and who are the people that are affected first? And it's always the Indigenous people, because we're, a lot of the people that were in that encampment were from Little Earth United Tribes housing, and they had been evicted. And that was really the result of this landslide that happened in Minneapolis over, a series of, I want to say like maybe 9 years, 10 years, but it happened very quickly. So we'll move the question to Jessie.
I'm not sure if I can really speak too much to that. I think maybe Shiala would be better suited for that, especially since you have some experience living in different communities who have made different efforts. I mean, I will say that in Lower Brule, there is a lot of, from what I saw, a lot of effort being made to bring the language to the school. There are some different agricultural projects that are happening. Some people using family land to create sustainable gardens. But it's, from what I saw, the challenge, I think, is that everything is so connected in a reservation. And so it seems like everything has to change at once in order for there to be progress. Or there is progress, but in order for there to be progress that feels fast enough for what everybody wants. Because, as these sustainable gardens are being grown, there's also people who are can't afford food and who are struggling with addiction, and so crops are being stolen. And so it's just also intertwined. It seems like there needs to be a holistic effort to work on everything so that there can be progress made bit by bit. And I just feel like in the city, that may be, I think it's just less tangible, because there's so much happening, and the concentration of the good and the bad is less tangible. So I guess that would be the differences that I saw.
So we'll take that question to Shiala.
I definitely agree with Jessie. It does feel like on the reservation, I mean, also depending on which reservation you're from, because they're all on the spectrum of good to bad, you know, okay, doing great. So at least where I'm from, which is South Dakota, my experience is that you do need to somehow improve multiple things at once. There's a lot more that could be done. I do feel like reservations are kind of, at least the rural setting is more of sandbox. So you could do more that you can't do in an urban setting. Like I was looking into getting an Earthship initiative going, which is a renewable housing off the grid type of thing. It's more holistic, and generally fits in with the culture better. But to put something into the community like that, you'd also have to protect it against the bad parts of the community, which could end up leading to not having, you know, as much of an effect as you would like. In an urban setting, since I don't live in South Dakota anymore, I've been back and forth between New Mexico and Colorado. I have noticed that there's more of an isolated feeling. Going back home, visiting Pine Ridge, it always feels like a breath of fresh air because, you know, everyone's right here and we all see each other. But even in Albuquerque, which people joke about being a big res, there's still so few that if I see someone I know is Native, we recognize each other immediately. Like there's a recognition because it's still so isolated in a city setting. The Indigenous community is very small and we all know each other, which can make it easier to collaborate. But as far as any sort of revitalizing systematic change, it does feel tempered down by that social isolation. And then also because a lot of the projects that I end up hearing about or talking about or being involved in that take place in Albuquerque don't focus on people in Albuquerque. It's how do we help Laguna, or how do we help Acoma, or a Navajo reservation, you know, in Arizona or something. Because we're all out here trying to make an effect where we come from. And then you're also competing with the distance. And that gets hard, but it's still fulfilling and it still makes a difference, at least to the individual. I mean, that's sort of like the analogy of the boy, there's a boy walking down a beach, picking up beached starfish and throwing them in one at a time. And there's hundreds. And then the question is, you could never throw all of them back. So what difference does it make? And the answer is, but it made a difference to that one, you know? And, you know, even if I can only make a difference to a few people at a time, it still matters. And then that's how you end up getting the deeper change home is for each person that you help, they'll help someone else. And then you just have to hope that that exponential growth happens. And I think it does. I mean, the main characters, the characters in Boxers of Brule, I mean, like Lacosta, she's doing well. And then, you know, Lacosta, as you progress in your journey, how many of your friends and family might you affect and help? Even if it's just, well, I'm doing better, so they see that, maybe they want to be a part of it. And, you know, leading by example, I think, makes a difference as well. Yeah, I do think there's a lot of hope, even though it can be a little difficult. I wish I could just go home and stay there, but then I wouldn't have access to the things that would keep moving stuff forward. And I get really homesick a lot, so that's part of it. And I'm sure you understand that. So I don't know. I feel like I'm just going on a tangent now, but those are my feelings, just sort of out there, you know. So
Thank you.
I guess I'll leave it there.
So we'll move the question to Alex.
What more can I say? You guys all done such an excellent job. I think, Missy, it sort of goes back to what you said, is I think, you know, I was taught the same thing, that if you leave and you learn, you go back and you help your people. And so that's something that I'm always thinking about as a filmmaker. And then all of my films are about home, which is really interesting, because I do think that you have to make a sacrifice sometimes in this career, and that often means moving away from your home and your family. And for myself, I was, you know, sort of the only family in like this generation to leave our community. And I think that comes with a lot of, you know, responsibility, but it also does come for a longing of home, especially right now, because it's not safe to go back home in case I'm sick and I bring it back home. So I think there's also a big part of, you know, moving the baton forward to keep, you know, revitalization and hope alive, and making sure that, you know, I can hand off the future of whatever I'm working on to someone else who's coming up behind me, is the sacrifice that I had to leave where I'm from, and I have to be away from my family. And I think that's a really interesting conversation. And I think a lot of us struggle with that, you know, even more, not even as just filmmakers, but as human beings, if you're going to school, if you're going to college or university away from your community, or if you're going, you know, to get help from another place, you know, you have to give up something. And you know, it's not always easy. And I think it's a common conversation that a lot of Indigenous filmmakers do have, that I have with people. And I think what's pretty amazing is there's pockets where we all get together like this, you know, through this Zoom meeting, but like, you know, at Imaginative, all of us Indigenous filmmakers are together, and we get to share these sort of things that are feelings that we don't generally get to talk about in a non-Indigenous space. And I think it's worthwhile having, you know, conversations about how do we, you know, bring back the things that we've learned back to our communities. And if I think, you know, you're bang on, if you change one person's life, it's worth it. And hopefully it inspires other people to keep moving forward. And also continue to make projects that are from your heart, and from, you know, your family, because I think all of our families are also behind us, and all of our ancestors are with us as we travel these unknown paths that take us, you know, whether that's to Berlinale or to Sundance. I think our ancestors are with us and pushing us forward and are guiding us. And I often have to think about that sometimes when I get really low or really lonesome or really lonely, to remember those things, that the path was created even before I could see what it was. And so I had to think about that constantly, but I love spaces like this where we get to talk about these things, because I think it's a real thing. And I think we're not the only people that feel, you know what I mean? Like in this room, there's a whole bunch of people who are having the same conversations about being away from their family and what it means to pursue something that might be bigger than yourself.
So beautiful. Thank you. So that sounds like a closing remark, but so we're going to close it up here. And I'd like for you to say like any closing remarks, or if you're excited about what you're working on next, if you want to throw a pitch out there of what you're doing, any sort of social media handles, just put it in the chat box. So I'll have, let's see, we'll have Jessie go first.
Well, I guess the one thing I would say in closing is I hope everybody gets a chance to see the film and to learn about the incredible young women that I had the pleasure of working with. And when you do that, if you're moved to send them a message or give them some words of encouragement, ask questions, I think it's really an important part of the process for them to see the impact that they're having on other people. So please do send us Instagram, Facebook messages. You can email boxersofruledoc@gmail.com, and just hope to hear from you.
Thank you. And we'll move it on to Jeffrey.
Exactly the same. Just I hope everybody gets a chance to see Isabelle's Garden. It was a film that I certainly put all of my heart into because I had no money when I made it, which I think it was made for like $0 with somebody else's camera and a tripod. So so I hope everybody gets a chance to see it, and also my feature film that I just finished in Scott Momaday Words from a Bear is on Amazon Prime and on iTunes right now, and I think for a limited amount of time, because it's going to be a part of American Masters. The series that it was on was American Masters, and which is a PBS series. They are putting me in their Emmy run for 2019, and I think they're going to make it free. Yeah, thank you. So really exciting time to be a part of things as a filmmaker, and and if anybody does have any questions for me, you certainly can email me. I'm a professor at Cornell, so if you go to Cornell and the Performing Media Arts, you can find my email there, and also find me on Facebook and Vimeo, where I have other films that you certainly can watch. So please send a shout out to me. I'd love to talk with anybody.
Thank you, Jeff. And congratulations. That's amazing. Let's move the question to Shiala.
I'm just happy to be a part of this. All of these things are things that I'm always thinking about in my day-to-day, especially with the quarantine, just sitting in front of my computer. So it was really nice to have this sort of gathering and the heart-to-heart in a way. And Boxers of Brule is a beautiful film. I think Jessie did a great job, and I hope you can give it a watch. So.
Thank you. And Lacosta. Any parting words of wisdom? What are you working on that you're excited about?
Right now I am in the process of, I was taking sports photos for the school and kind of in the process of getting those worked out. Yeah, thank you. Just a big thank you to everybody coming out and showing up. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to our audience, and we will have this posted on the page that your films are. So if you want to share it, it'll be good. I mean, we're making history right now. This is pretty big. It's really exciting. So thank you everyone for being here. I want to thank everyone from the Walker, Kelsey, Michael, Deb, Cheryl. I don't know if Cheryl's still here. Cheryl, thank you so much for supporting Indigenous film and Indigenous storytellers.